Hi folks, today we're going to be talking a little bit about neck resets. Now, I do lots of neck resets, I do them all the time, but sometimes folks will bring in a guitar and it doesn't make sense to do a neck reset. This is one of those guitars. The problem with it is that the neck was poorly set to begin with at the factory. It was just poorly set. And here's the problem. He spent $70 on the guitar, $70, and he doesn't want to spend $300 or $400 on a neck reset. Sometimes it isn't worth, if you spent $70 on a guitar, doing a $300 or $400 neck reset. And he agrees. In fact, not only agrees, but he said, I would throw it out first, essentially. So the truss rod was set about pretty much properly. It was set at about 0.6 of an inch over the 7th fret with the 1st and 14th fret pressed down. However, when I checked at the 12th fret for the height of the string over the fret, it was at about 4¼ millimeters, about twice what it should be, twice as high as it should be. And the saddle was not particularly high. There was not a lot to remove from there. I looked down the neck, I sighted down the neck, and I could see that the neck pointed down about 1/8 inch lower than the top of the bridge. Now this has plenty of, it's a plenty thick bridge, so I decided to save him some money. You can see there's lots of meat on this height here. There's over 1/4 inch. I'm going to take a little bit off of here. Take a little bit off the top of the bridge. I don't normally do that unless, again, the person brings it in, they didn't spend much for it, or they don't want to spend any money, or they just can't spend any money for it to have the necks reset and done properly. And that's really the proper way to do this, do a full neck reset. However, you probably, if I do the bridge, sand it down on the top, lower everything a little bit, he can probably get 20 or more years out of this thing without having to deal with it again. And on a $70 guitar, 20 years is a pretty good thing. How am I going to go about doing this? Well, I've made myself a neat little tool. I took a straight edge, and at the very end I put a very sharp little point down at the bottom part of this. You can see that there, right here, a little point. And what I do, so that I know how much to take off, is I lay this straight edge on the fingerboard, and I slide it over to the bridge, and just make a little mark with that little point. And I do it on both sides, on the treble and on the bass side. And that gives me a place to where I'm going to cut this bridge down to. I'll make a little mark across here, and then I will sand down the top of this until it gets to that point, or just below the point. I want the little line I made, because that's part of the bottom of this. I want it to be just gone. When you have a bad neck set like this, where the neck is essentially forward, it is actually, by going forward even a little bit, it's changing the scale length of the guitar and making it's gonna all play sharp. So I'm gonna, on the saddle, I will actually cut the saddle and so that it leans back, so the strings hit further back, and it hopefully will play in tune all the way up the neck. That's the plan. So I made the marks on here, and I'm going to sand this down. You'll see that I've already paint taped off 2 layers of painter's tape on the top. I'm going to use a sander to get this down. You could use a bunch of different ways. You could do this by hand. It would take forever, but you could do it by hand. You could use like a block, sanding block. You could use a rasp. It'd be a little tough. You're working near the top, so that'd be kind of tough to work with. I personally like to use a little palm sander. I can hold it and sort of guide it over, keep an eye, and do the work. Here we are. I've got my little palm sander. It's all ready to go. The top is protected. case I, God forbid, slide off or do something silly. Before I start doing this, I do want to mention that there are lots of instances where you wouldn't want to do this. Certainly, if the guitar is worth more than the repair, you definitely want to do it right. You want to take off the neck, do a neck reset. It's not that big a deal. Neck resets, they just take time and you have to be careful. But they're not that tough to do. They just take a lot of time. If, in other words, you wouldn't do this on an old Martin or almost any Martin for that matter, unless you got it for a nickel, you know, that sort of thing. You wouldn't do this on a guitar that has a bridge that has a crack in between the pinholes. That's not unusual on guitars, and sometimes that's fine, you know, that'll stay stable for many, many years like that. But thinning the bridge when you have a split there already could be problematic. You could end up with it actually splitting more because there's less meat there to hold it together, that sort of thing. So there are times when you wouldn't want to do this. This is really one of those things that you just, the person is going to either do it this way or they're essentially going to throw it out. So it's really a last resort sort of thing, but it does work. And here we go. We're going to give it a try. Let me get my dust mask on. I stopped for a moment. I'm just about done taking everything off I need here, but I stopped for a moment to show you that while you're doing this, you're getting some real fine dust, like rosewood dust that you're collecting. And this stuff is like gold. You know, what you want to do is you want to take it and keep it. If you do these types of repairs, or any repairs on guitars, if you ever end up with like a split in a fingerboard, or you're doing a fret level, or not a fret level, but like a fret removal, and you get little chips or whatever, this dust, it works great as a filler. You use this with a little bit of glue, fills, makes everything look brand new again. That's important. So you keep this stuff. You don't just blow it away. You don't just, because it's good stuff. I do the same thing with anytime I'm grinding bone nuts or a bone saddle. I keep the bone dust because that's good to have when you're doing repairs. You have like a little chip in a nut or saddle, you can repair that very easily with a little bit of CA glue and the bone. Or like I said, this is nice rosewood, and I'm just putting it in here, but you can see there's a nice amount of it in here, nice amount of dust, and that's going to work well down the road. It's going to be something I'll be able to use when doing another repair. Okay, so I've removed as much as I want from the top of the bridge, and it is not a huge amount, and I've taken the extra step of reshaping the top of the bridge to how it was before. This bridge was not perfectly flat on top. It sort of arches a little bit this way, and it definitely arches like the fingerboard does. So I definitely cut it so that it arches this way, and I arched it this way. It also had a little bit of a cutout in the back here, and I've done that with this little guy here. And taken sandpaper and just cut along here to give it that same shape, and I also rounded the front just slightly like it was originally. Now I'm going to take finer grades of sandpaper to really smooth this out so it looks like it just came from the factory. So that's the next step. I've got the bridge to the height I want. I've sanded it with increasingly finer grades of sandpaper to get it so it's nice and smooth again. Before I finish up with that, what I'm going to do is I am going to slot it. I'm going to slot bridge pin slots or holes because I know this saddle is going to be nice and low. And I do want the strings to still have a nice sharp angle. I don't want them going over the saddle straight. So I'm going to do that with this little tool I made. It's essentially just a jigsaw blade. That's a jigsaw blade that I just took a piece of wood and glued it into place. And I use this to slot because this is about the thickness I want for slotting, and it's also about the depth I want that will fit down the pinholes here without causing too much trouble. So I need to set this up so it goes sort of straight towards the headstock, and then just start cutting. This is a slow and slightly tedious process, but it works, and it works well. So, you know, you don't mess with progress, I guess. I want to cut in at about 45 degrees, but I don't want to remove too much of this bridge if I can help it. I don't want to make it any weaker than the fact that I've just taken about a 1/16 off the bridge. So, you know, step at a time. Here we go. And, well, here I'll just show you real fast here. You can see I've slotted it right there. Okay, and I'm going to slot it a little more, but it doesn't take that long, and it's a good thing to do. It'll definitely make the strings contact with the top hold to the top better. So that's pretty much how it's going to look. It looks pretty much like the original bridge. I have another Yamaha here that somebody else did this to, and they didn't bother to round the back or keep the top slightly arched or keep it arched this way, and it's dead flat across it. And I could tell as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, oh, somebody did the quick neck reset, which isn't a neck reset. It's where you essentially just flatten down the top of the bridge. And if you look at it from this angle, you can see that it is thinner. It's about a 1/16 of an inch less deep, maybe slightly more, but not enough that I think will be a problem down the road. This person doesn't use heavy strings or anything like that, so it shouldn't be a problem. And there are no splits in here. You'll notice this guitar is so new, it still has the plastic on the pickguard. It's unbelievable that Yamaha would let this thing go out with such a bad neck set. So I'm just finishing up the last touches on this. What did I do? Well, of course I cut the saddle. Like I said, I compensated it. I strung it up, checked to see everything, and everything looked pretty good. So what I'm doing now is I just finished cutting the nut slots so that they're at an optimum height for each string, so they won't buzz when they're played open. And the last thing I do is I take a pencil, and this is a soft graphite pencil, and I will pop the strings out of their little slot and just put a little graphite in there, sort of twist and turn, because I want it to be nice and slippery in there so the string moves through easily and the guitar stays in tune. Once you tune it, it stays in tune. Now I know there are people out there who will curse me after I say what I say next, but I still use a luthier's knot when putting the strings on, and it's something I've been doing for 50 years, and I have not seen a reason why not to do it. People said, oh, it's such a hassle to remove the strings. It isn't. It takes maybe a half a second longer to just go a little further around when you're taking the string off, and then just pull it off. It's no big deal. So I just graphited the nut. I'm going to tune it up. I will show you how low I was able to get, how low I was able to get the action. Remember, it was at 4.25 millimeters. Sounds pretty good. I just ran it through an amp to make sure, but let me show you what we did here. As you remember, we sanded the whole top of the bridge. I tried to get it back to looking pretty much exactly like it did before. I have an arch going this way and an arch going this way, and the back end is all rolled over like they had. The saddle is quite low, as you can see, but there's saddle there. And what's even better is if you look carefully, you can see that there's plenty of break angle between the string and the top of the saddle. So it pushes down on the saddle and it gives me a nice clear tone. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure this and see what we ended up with at the 12th fret. We got, it looks like 2.15 millimeters on the bass side and 1.5 millimeters on the treble side. So 2.15 down from 4.25 millimeters. That's a huge difference. It plays nicely now. It feels good. I just polished up the frets. I also cut it at the nut so it feels good in first position. Plays in tune. Compensating this back, the notes all play. So they all play in tune. They're not sharp now. So that's good. So it worked. The difference in price. So to do a neck reset on this guitar he got for $70, it would have cost about $300 or $400. For me to do the bridge adjustment, essentially, by taking about just a little over 1/16 of an inch off and cutting the saddle down, that was about $100. So he saved himself $300 essentially, and it plays right. It plays really well. Will it go down more? It can. I actually put a small shim under here, about a 0.5 millimeter shim, so it could go down another 1/4 millimeter if you really wanted it to. But I don't see why. It's playing nice and clean. Even with a heavy hand, it plays nice and clean. So there it is. It's playing nice. It sounds good. Sounds good. So it's in good shape. He'll be stunned that he essentially now he's paid $100 more or so for having this work done, plus a full setup. I did a full setup, but he's got the guitar for for about $200. It's a heck of a guitar. That's the bridge lowering setup, and it works quite well. You know, if you're a person who doesn't know if that's a good thing to do, you got to know what you're doing. Obviously, you don't want to just do it and then go, oh, I screwed it up even more. But it is an option on some of these guitars that really the person either doesn't want to spend the money, or it would just get thrown out otherwise because the action's so high it's unplayable. So there you go. Take care.